a bunch of snowstorms. But yeah, I think it's pretty much over. So, all right, well, let's jump in. So today, we dollies, what we do is we kind of jump around um, week to week. So it's fine. You know, you're not missing anything by jumping in with us today. Rarely do we continue something week to week. So basically, every class is one lesson. We do a reading, we talk about a topic, and then we move on. Um, so today, what we're going to talk about is prohibition, and I have on the screen there 1920 to 1933. So really through the 20s and into the 30s. But when you think of prohibition, it's the 1920s. Um, so what do you guys know about prohibition? It's on the screen there. But what is your prior knowledge of prohibition? I think we've talked about it before.
A ban on something?
Yeah, when you prohibit something, okay, let's look at the word. When you prohibit something, you ban it, you say it's not allowed. Right, okay. So
I knew that word before.
Yeah.
I knew that before this pandemic, that's what I learned when they said large gatherings are prohibited,
yeah.
which means it's banned. Banned means you're banned, it's not allowed. They're not letting everybody come and gather together. They're not letting a lot of people gather together. That's what they mean.
Yeah, so yeah, we heard that last year, and this year, you know, things are prohibited, but large gatherings are prohibited. That's a good point. So when we talk about prohibition, you know, as a you know, that's a noun. So to prohibit is the verb, prohibition is a noun. We could say right now there is a prohibition on large gatherings, is how you'd say that. There is a prohibition on large gatherings. Or the president came out with a new prohibition, or the governor came out with a new prohibition.
Sorry, I think they made you perfect.
Prohibiting something has to be prohibited, not allowed, banned. But when we talk about prohibition, and usually with a capital P, and we're talking about 1920s, what was prohibited in prohibition in the 1920s? Anybody know? Well, let's look in the overview. It says prohibition was a nationwide ban on the sale and import of alcoholic beverages that lasted from 1920 to 1933. So prohibition here is referring to the nationwide prohibition of alcohol, to drink, sell, or manufacture alcohol. So what we see though is, and I can't remember if it's really talked about here, but it did not lead to a drop in drinking alcohol. You know, the average American drank just as much alcohol during Prohibition than before Prohibition. So we'll talk about this. We're going to look at the overall history of it, this 10 years, 13 years, what led to it a little bit, and then we can talk about kind of the ramifications, the outcomes, the history of it. Okay, so overview, it says it was a nationwide ban on the sale and import of alcohol. Protestants, progressives, and women all spearheaded the drive to institute prohibition. So that's going to what led up to it. Prohibition led directly to the rise of organized crime. And the 21st Amendment, ratified in December 1933, repealed prohibition. If you repeal something, repeal a law, or repeal an amendment, what does that mean, to repeal?
To stand against.
Well, no, not exactly. Not exactly. It's specific, like if I repeal a law.
That means you want that law to be reversed.
Well, it means that it is. It is undone. Okay. So it's not necessarily I am standing against it. It's that the law is undone, taken off. We say taken off the books. Um, it's no longer valid. It's no longer active. So what happens is then I think it was the 19th. Was it the 18th Amendment? 19th Amendment? I can't remember. 18th Amendment. We'll get there. But the 18th Amendment prohibited alcohol. Then there was a couple other amendments in between, including women get the right to vote. And then the 21st Amendment repeals the 18th Amendment. It undoes it. It removes it. So we've talked about amendments before. Amendments are a big deal, right? You're amending the Constitution. You are either adding or subtracting. You're changing the Constitution of the United States. Big deal. Very big deal. Not hard, not easy to do either, right? It's a big deal to get an amendment passed. So the fact that they would do it and then undo it is a pretty remarkable thing. So we'll get there. Oh, excuse me. So we'll take a look at this history. Jendaya, could you read paragraph 1, the temperance movement?
Sure. Hold on.
Sure.
Thinking. Okay, here we go. All right, let's go. The roots of the temperance movement stretch all the way back to the early 19th century. The American Temperance Society, founded in 1826, encouraged voluntary abstinence from alcohol, and influence may successor organizations which advocated mandatory prohibition of the sale and import of alcoholic beverages. Many religious sects, I'm not saying that right.
Sects, yeah, sects.
Okay, and denominations, and especially Methodists, became active in temperance movement. Women were especially influential. The Ladies Christians Temperance Union, founded in 1873, was one of the leading advocates of prohibition.
Okay, so leading advocates of prohibition. So this talks about the different groups that groups of people and organizations that opposed the drinking of alcohol. And we can tell, here's a little academic tip, okay? These things are capitalized, right? The American Temperance Society. I also made them in bold, but the American Temperance Society, capital letters. It means it's a proper noun. It means that's the name of something, right? The Women's Christian Temperance Union. These are groups that you can join. They're, the capital letters, these are something you've maybe never heard of before, but as we read, the capital letters should indicate, oh, this isn't just, a group of people, out there. This is a group that you can join. This is an institution, a club, an organization, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the American Temperance Society. Okay. Temperance is a good word there. When you're talking about prohibition, temperance is a vocabulary word. So temperance, not something we talk about today, but if you temper, let me see. I like to snack, right? Okay. So I love Cheez-Its. I love crackers. I'll just eat, if you give me a box of crackers, I'll eat the whole thing. So, but obviously that's not healthy to eat a whole box of crackers all the time. So I have that temptation to snack all the time. I need to temper that urge to snack. So to temper something means to like slow it down or stop it, to control something. So when you talk about the Women's Christian Temperance Union or the American Temperance Society, or historians in this time period will talk about the temperance movement. Temperance means to temper, specifically here, alcohol. Okay, especially when you capitalize the T. Temperance refers to, historians just mean for it to refer to controlling alcohol, people being against alcohol. Okay, which people are against alcohol today, but back then it was a real movement, even with political power. Is these people who thought, well, you know what, this alcohol thing is really out of control. Of course, alcohol's been around for thousands of years, but um, this temperance movement, a lot of churches, it says Methodists, many religious sects. Sects, that's the same, that's not sex like sex, it's sects, sects. Same
Yeah,
root word as
I
like,
just
yeah, it sounds
that's
the
the
same.
problem. I just messed it up. I don't know why I said it
No,
like
yeah,
that.
it's almost the exact, it sounds almost exactly the same, but that's the
Yes.
same root word as sections, right? When you divide something up, it's sections. So religious sects is groups, different religious groups. Okay, that's all it is. So religious groups, denominations, especially Methodists, which is a branch of Christianity, um, became active in the temperance movement. So a lot of these church groups, a lot of Christian churchgoers, and then these groups, like we talk about capitalization, the American Temperance Society. These people are against and are speaking out against um, the consumption of alcohol. And that's the early 1900s. This is before 1920. This is before Prohibition happens. We're talking about the lead up to 1920. Okay. Ruby,
Hi, I just came. I'm late.
yeah,
Sorry.
Ruby, I was just gonna say hi. Thanks for logging in. No problem.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing well, and you?
Good, good, good.
Yeah. Oluwakemi, could you read paragraph 2 for us?
During the Progressive Era, calls for, calls for prohibition became more strident in many ways. Temperance activists were seeking to ameliorate the negative social effects of rapid industrialization. Salons and the heavy drinking culture they foster were associated with immigrants and members of the working class, and were seen as detrimental to the values of a Christian society. The anti-salon league, with strong support from Protestants. The anti-salon league, with strong support from Protestants and other Christian denominations, spearheaded the drive for nationwide prohibition. In fact, the Anti-Salon League was the most powerful political pressure group in US history. No other organization had ever managed to alter the nation's constitution.
Right, thank you. So that's another group. Thank you for reading. So that's another group, the Anti-Saloon League. Okay, a saloon is like a bar, right? We think of saloons like in Wild West Western movies, like a saloon. But I guess we don't talk about saloons here. But my town has a lot of bars, but nobody says they're going down to the saloon. But the Anti-Saloon League just means anti-bar, right? Going down to a bar to drink. So being against drinking. Saloons and the heavy drinking culture they fostered were associated with immigrants and members of the working class, and were seen as detrimental to the values of a Christian society. Okay, we've talked about immigrants a few weeks ago when we talked about the Irish potato famine, right? Those millions of Irish people came to the United States and were not welcomed very much. So really, this early 1900s, and when did we say the Irish potato famine? What was that, 1845, I think, if I remember?
It is 1845 to 1890, I
Yeah,
believe it was.
yeah.
Yeah, the
So,
potato famine.
so yeah, the late 1800s, early 1900s. There's a lot of immigrants coming, but a lot of those immigrants were not welcomed. They were looked at as we see today. Still, there's parts of America that are not looking kindly on immigrants. So, they're being blamed for the heavy drinking and okay. So we have the Anti-Saloon League. But it says, interestingly, it says, in fact, the Anti-Saloon League was the most powerful political pressure group in U.S. history. No other organization had ever managed to alter the nation's constitution. Okay, which is the next thing we're going to see. Let me, while I'm thinking of it, let me find. I'm thinking of a famous cartoon, a political cartoon.
Woodpecker.
Now let me see if I can find this here. Okay, this is a famous cartoon. I think it would have. I don't know if this would have been put into magazines or newspapers or which what this would have been. It's called The Drunkard's Progress. Let me see if I can get this.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a famous historical thing here. Let me get a big one. Okay, here we go. Can you see that on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is, I don't know when this was from. Yeah, somewhere around the time. But anytime you're talking about the temperance movement, you're talking about prohibition, this cartoon always comes up. Like a lot of high school history courses, this is going to be on the test. And you see, so it's called The Drunkard's Progress, from the first glass to the grave. And this is like a political cartoon that it would show up in magazines or maybe be a poster. Maybe your church would hang it on the wall to, send a message. But it takes you from step 1, a glass with friends. Step 2, a glass to keep the cold out. Step 3, a glass too much, and the guy's getting drunker. And then drunker, and now he's partying. Step 6 is poverty and disease. And so now this same guy, you're seeing kind of a story unfold here in this comic. Step 6 is poverty and disease. Step 7, forsaken by friends. So he's left, he's dumped by his friends. Step 8, desperation and crime. Step 9, death by suicide. Okay, now, lots of people drink alcohol, and that's not always how it works, right? Plenty of people today and then drink responsibly, right? But this is, you could say, propaganda, right? It's a poster that's meant to send a message. So at a time when the temperance movement was very strong, and there was a lot of people, Christian groups and temperance groups, they were really pushing against alcohol consumption. This is trying to send a message that, hey, you start with one glass, a glass with friends, and then a glass to keep the cold out. And then before you know it, you're poor, poverty and disease, forsaken by friends, desperation and crime, and death by suicide. So this is saying, don't even take that first drink of alcohol any day, because you never know. And then at the bottom, what is it? It's a woman and her child. Their barn's burning down. She's crying. The child is, alone. So that's sending the message. This is part of the temperance movement. This is sending the message. Don't even drink that first glass of alcohol, right? So this is one side of the argument. Today, people make the argument that I can drink responsibly, right? Not everybody who drinks alcohol is following the path of this guy on this cartoon, on this drawing. So I just thought of that. It's an interesting historical thing. Anytime people are talking about temperance and prohibition, this comic, this piece of art usually pops up. Okay. So it's interesting. Here's a famous, an old picture, men dumping barrels of alcohol. Okay. And that was something that they did. They would sometimes commit crimes. You remember, just like the Boston Tea Party, where they dumped the tea into the river in Boston in order to not pay the taxes on it. Sometimes temperance people would protest by dumping out tons and tons of alcohol out of barrels. So this was a big deal at the time. Okay, today alcohol is extremely widespread. Some people drink, some people don't drink. That's fine, but there's not a big temperance movement today. Back then, there was a big temperance movement. People talked about it a lot. And it says the Anti-Saloon League. There's another picture in my mind. Let me see if I can find it. Anti-Saloon League. Let me see if I can find this image. No, I'm not coming up with it. That's just a bunch of old. Yeah, just a bunch of old newspaper things. Okay. The Anti-Saloon League was politically powerful. And it says no other organization had ever managed to alter the nation's constitution. So let's see how this works. Enacting the prohibition, the 18th Amendment. Paragraph 3, the 18th Amendment was ratified on January 16th, 1919, and went into effect 1 year later on January 17th, 1920. So they put it in the Constitution, but it doesn't take effect for a year. And that's probably wise, right? If you're going to change the laws to make drinking alcohol, selling alcohol, manufacturing alcohol illegal, you probably shouldn't have it take effect tomorrow, because then that means everybody in the country is breaking laws. So they wait a year for it to take effect, and that's probably smart. The 18th Amendment reflected the progressives' faith, people who are progressive. This is also called the progressive era, this early 1900s. Culture and society was making progress. So it says the 18th Amendment reflected the progressives' faith in the federal government's ability to fix social problems. They believed in the government's ability to fix problems. Because the law did not specifically outlaw the consumption of alcohol, however, I guess I was wrong there. It did not specifically outlaw the consumption of alcohol. However, many U.S. citizens stockpiled personal reserves of beer, wine, and liquor before the ban took effect. Okay, so I was wrong. It made illegal the sale and manufacture of alcohol, but did not address the consumption of alcohol. So if I love beer, and I know that a year from now it's going to be illegal to buy or sell beer, well, then I'm going to just store up as much beer in my basement as I can in the next 12 months until it becomes illegal. It says people are stockpiling alcohol. Okay, so that's interesting. Paragraph 4. Though the advocates of prohibition, people who supported it, advocates of prohibition, had argued that banning sales of alcohol would reduce criminal activity, it in fact directly contributed to the rise of organized crime. After the 18th Amendment went into force, bootlegging, or the illegal distillation, making and sale of alcoholic beverages became widespread. So bootlegging, illegal alcohol, becomes widespread. Al Capone, here he's his mugshot when he was finally arrested. Al Capone was the most notorious of the Prohibition era gangsters who made their fortunes from the illegal distillation and sale of alcohol. Many law enforcement agencies simply lack the resources to consistently and effectively enforce prohibition. So, starting January 17th, 1920, it is illegal to manufacture or sell alcohol. I forgot, it's not illegal to consume alcohol, so people still want to drink. The temperance people who supported prohibition, they were thinking, well, if we make it illegal to sell alcohol, there won't be any alcohol to sell, and then people won't drink because there won't be any alcohol, right? So they probably said, we don't need to make it illegal to sell it, because once we make it illegal, or we don't have to, they thought we don't have to make it illegal to drink it, because if we make it illegal to sell it, it won't be sold and there won't be any alcohol anymore. Well, they were wrong, because a wide, organized crime society, underworld, came about that people were illegally making and selling alcohol. So now it's illegal and it's happening illegally. So basically, just like today, like illegal drugs are, um, you know, it's totally invisible to the government. It's illegal. It's dangerous. And the same thing back then was happening with alcohol. Al Capone and a bunch of other gangsters were making a lot of money manufacturing, distilling, and selling alcohol. There were still the bars, but then they were secret and illegal and kind of more dangerous. Okay, people, consumption of alcohol did not stop during Prohibition. It just made it harder to do and more dangerous. Um, okay, uh, Ruby, do you want to read paragraph 5?
Okay, I can try.
Okay.
Mm. Women were just as active in the anti-prohibition campaigning as they had been in the campaign to uh,
Enact.
enact prohibition. The Women's Organization for National Prohibition reform led the driver for repeal. The organization famed it campaigning the moral terms, arguing that the effects of prohibition, how to say this?
Prohibition.
Prohibition. The rise of, of, of a criminal class, the corruption of public officials, and a widespread the respected, yes, for the rule of law. Representation, yes,
Represented.
represented a serious uh, threat to American homes and families.
Okay. Thank you. So it says women were very active in the temperance movement, and now
Mhm.
women are very active in the anti-prohibition. So now that prohibition is here after 1920, now people are against prohibition for many of the same. Sometimes it was the same people. um, when they were the temperance movement, when they were trying to get prohibition done, they said, well, this will be better for society. It'll make our families more wholesome and better, good Christian people. And it'll eliminate alcohol. But then
Mhm.
once it's there and they're seeing how this works in society when you make the manufacture and sale of alcohol illegal, then they're saying, okay, now this is the problem, because it affects it creates a rise of a criminal class, the corruption of public officials, right? People are being bribed, police are being bribed. Okay, well, you caught me selling alcohol, but here, I'm going to pay you a bribe and you're not going to turn me in. Okay.
Mm.
And the widespread disrespect for the rule of law. The average person still wants to go to the bar and have a beer, right? And they're still going to do that. But in order for them to do that, that means they now have to break the law. And
Mm.
so people are still going to drink alcohol. But when you make it illegal, that means they're going to have to break the law to drink alcohol. So part of the push against prohibition is, hey, this is causing everybody to be criminals.
Mhm.
And so it represents a serious threat to American homes and families. Jendai, could you read paragraph 6?
Another factor militating in favor of repeal was the onset of the Great Depression. Given the dire economic situation facing the nation, the federal government could not afford to forego the tax revenues from the production and consumption of alcoholic beverages.
Okay, thank you. Let's stop there. So that's another interesting point. Now, this is something that a historian would think about, right? The temperance people said, "Hey, we got to stop alcohol. It's bad for us." You know, the woman in that picture, the drunkard's progress that we looked at, you know, the woman underneath the bridge thing, she would say, "Oh, my husband, he was a good husband, and then he took a drink of alcohol and he turned into a monster or whatever." Um, they would say, got to stop alcohol. But the historian looks at the whole picture, and you see that you can stop the sale, you can make illegal the sale and manufacture of alcohol, but when you do, you lose all the taxes that are earned on the sale of alcohol. Now the Great Depression happens. Okay, the stock market collapses in October of 1929. So this is 1920, 1929, and then the Great Depression hits. Right, millions of people lose their jobs. Businesses close, and it's a big deal. The Great Depression is a big deal. 19 really doesn't get going till 1930, but 1930, 31. There's the Great Depression, economic collapse, millions of Americans losing their jobs, and so all of a sudden it says the government could not afford, the federal government, national government, could not afford to give up the tax revenues from the production and consumption of alcoholic beverages. So some people are saying, hey, we made a couple $1 million in taxes on every year on alcohol when it was legal. It'd be nice to have that couple $1 million back, or who knows how, lots of $1 million probably. Olawakimi, can you read paragraph 7?
The 21st Amendment, which repealed the 18th Amendment, was ratified on December 5, 1933, conclusively ending the nation's ban on the manufacture and distribution of alcohol. Prohibition was a social experiment that had nurtured the very ills that it sought to ameliorate: criminal activity, public corruption, and a casual disregard for the rule of law.
Okay, thank you. So that's kind of our, if we take this as an article, an essay, that's kind of our summary conclusion sentence, right? Prohibition was a social experiment, and it is kind of a social experiment, that had nurtured the very ills that it had sought to ameliorate. It nurtured, right? It helped and took care of and made grow the very ills, the very bad things that it sought to ameliorate. What do you think ameliorate means? It's seeking to ameliorate the problems in society. What do you think ameliorate means?
Overdo?
No, not overdue.
Okay. Overwhelming? I don't know.
Well, prohibition nurtured the very problems, let's say, that it sought to ameliorate. It meant to ameliorate the problems in society,
Mm,
to take care of, to address a problem, to solve a problem.
okay.
Okay. So if my daughter comes home from school and she's crying, I want to find out what she's upset about and then help her ameliorate that situation. Right? She had a fight with a friend or bad grade or whatever.
Okay.
I want to ameliorate means to make better, to solve a problem. Okay, and I
Okay.
think that word came up somewhere else in this reading.
Mm.
Okay, so it says it was a social experiment that had nurtured the very problems that it sought to ameliorate: criminal activity, public corruption, and a casual disregard for the rule of law. So in the end, 13 years later, they undo it. I don't know. It'd be interesting. It'd be very interesting to see the Supreme Court justices in 1920 that passed the 18th Amendment causing prohibition. It would be interesting to see if uh, how many of those justices from 1920 were still on the Supreme Court in 1933. That'd be really cool to see.
Mm.
Oh, Guisha, thank you for logging in. I see that there. Because the Supreme Court is people, right? It's 9 people, and so it'd be interesting to see were the same 9, or probably the majority of those people, were they still around in 1933, and if they did, what did they have to say about that 18th Amendment that they were undoing with the 20?
Mm.
Well, yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Okay, so let's look at these discussion questions. Why did progressives, people at the time, temperance people, and especially women, support the ban on alcohol sales? Why did they want to ban alcohol? Think back to that cartoon we looked at. What do you think?
Personally, because I think it affects women more, because when the husband drinks and something terrible happens to that man, then so it affects the women. That's why they were like supporting it. And I think in those days, women are not allowed to drink. So it's only the men that are enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
So they try to ban it, and from men taking it, then it boils down again to sometimes when some men drink too much alcohol, they don't have their senses,
Right.
and they go back beating their wife or doing something bad to their wife. So I think that's why women,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
that's why, sorry.
No, you're right. I mean,
Somebody is
you always got
interrupting
to
me here.
think back at that historical moment. Okay, so we have our opinions today, and we see alcohol today in our society in a certain way. But you got to think, okay, this is 1920. This is actually 100 years ago right now. So what was life like for the average American woman then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most
Yeah.
likely she didn't have a job. Most
Mm-hmm.
likely she was married and her husband had the job. Her husband brought in home the money. Well, we all know the feeling that, like, I earned this money, I should be able to do what I want with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I want to take a vacation, I earned this money, I want to take a vacation. If I want to drink beer, I'm going to go buy beer because I earned this money. So think historically, what was it like for a woman then? Don't think now. Don't think what's my opinion today. Think, what was it like to be a woman back then? And the women are at home, taking care of the children, taking care of a home, taking care of a husband who has a job. Okay, I hope it's not overly sexist to view things that way. And so they're kind of helpless in that situation. Um, they just barely had the right to vote at that point. Actually, the 18th Amendment comes before the the right to vote for women. So, they're living in a society they can't even vote for president. Um, and so, yeah, men drink. So there goes all the family money, right? To the husband going out to the bar, to the saloon. And B, sometimes drunk husbands get violent. So
Yeah.
it was women pushing the temperance movement.
Right. Cost problem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the second question, do you think prohibition was an effective solution to the ills of a rapidly industrializing society? Was it the right move in 1920 to prohibit alcohol?
Yes, I think so. Because that time a lot of problems, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting period in history to see something done and then
Mhm.
undone.
Right.
The last sentence here refers to it as a social experiment, and it kind of is.
Right.
Um, maybe society was to the point where you have to do it just to see if it works. You know, um, what were the positive and negative consequences of prohibition? So let me ask you this: what somebody tell me, rephrase back to me. What were the reasons that they ended prohibition? What were the negative consequences of prohibition?
Economy, money.
Yeah, the economy. Yeah, taxes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, the tax money that they did not get because the government could not tax the sale of alcohol because it was illegal, right?
Right.
They had hoped that there would be no sales of alcohol. Instead, there was lots of sales of alcohol, but it just was illegal and thus out of the reaches of uh, the tax, earning taxes. Okay, so that was a big part of it, the government.
Mhm.
And just they say, okay, well, everybody's still drinking alcohol. Now it just makes them criminals to go
Mhm.
drink alcohol.
Right.
Um, and so you see some of those same uh, arguments today with recreational marijuana. I think I saw a fact the other day. I think 14 states. I could be wrong. Let's Google this actually.
Mm.
Uh, let's Google how many states. In how many states is marijuana legal? 36 states have approved. Okay, that's medical marijuana. Let's say recreational. Okay, 14 states.
Mm.
Okay, so years ago, and I don't know when this would have started. Um, it was illegal to smoke marijuana, right?
Right.
Yeah. It was marijuana is a drug, it's illegal. And
Mhm.
then you started having medical marijuana because it can alleviate stress or it can alleviate pain, right?
Right. Mhm.
So I think I forget what state was the first state to legalize medical marijuana, but you needed a doctor's excuse. I have severe back pain, or I have, some severe pain that smoking marijuana
Mhm.
alleviates, ameliorates, you could say. Um,
Mm.
and then some states uh, just started, especially out west, making it legal. So here's a map. And this is Wikipedia, but I would assume it's correct. Um, blue states here are where recreational use of marijuana is legal. Like smoking it just because you want to get high is legal. 14 states. The darker green is legal for medical use. The lighter green is legal for medical marijuana, but limited, somewhat limited. Only a couple of gray 2 states
Mm.
is marijuana completely illegal, or yeah, completely illegal. So you see, um, and if you dug into this argument, okay, why should we make marijuana legal? Just to get high, just to smoke marijuana.
Mm.
Um, I would imagine if you investigated, the people would make the argument, well, people are going to smoke marijuana anyway, and so you might as well make it legal where the government can come in and make it a little safer,
Mhm.
right? It's not going to, just they can regulate it a little bit and they can tax it. Okay, so a lot of people are smoking marijuana. Let's put a 5%, let's put sales tax on it, and we'll make a 6% sales tax on every whatever sold of marijuana. Okay. So you see, that historical example of prohibition, it's related, you could say. It plays out very differently, but it's kind of related to this topic of marijuana use. Maybe someday, I would imagine 50 years from now, 100 years from now, this map here on this Wikipedia page is going to look different. I would not be surprised if more states fully legalize marijuana, right? And there's a temperance movement against marijuana. I've never smoked marijuana. I wouldn't recommend it, but there's people on both sides of the issue, just like back in 100 years ago with alcohol. So it's kind of interesting to look back on the history of one topic and see how it can relate to a related topic today. Okay. I have one more thing I want to look at, but before we do, any other questions or comments on prohibition? Okay. Let's use this to then jump into just looking at constitutional amendments. Okay. So we have and this is all the constitutional amendments. There's only 27. And today we looked at the 18th Amendment and the 21st Amendment. Okay. So we have the year, you look at the columns, this is the year they're ratified, then the amendment number, and then basically what it is, right? The first 10 are the Bill of Rights. We call them the Bill of Rights. They were all ratified, enacted, put into law in 1791 as a big bunch, a big block of 10 amendments. The way they came about is that they wrote the Constitution in 1789, I think. And then to ratify the Constitution, they wanted every state to ratify it, right? So, presumably they sent us a copy of the Constitution, which was the newly designed government, 3 branches of government and everything. They sent that Constitution to every state, and then the state legislatures, like we have the state capital in Harrisburg, like our state people in Harrisburg, which probably did. I think it probably was in Harrisburg at the time. They would look at this new Constitution and they would say, yes, Pennsylvania wants this. So they would vote, and they would vote to ratify it or vote to not ratify it if there was things they didn't like in this newly designed government. Well, as different states were voting and discussing within each state, right? Pennsylvania is going to discuss it. Massachusetts is going to discuss it. South Carolina is going to discuss it and vote within each state. Some of the states were coming up with problems, and they say, well, you don't really address religious freedom in the Constitution, or, what are some of these other things? You don't really address the rights of people who have been accused of crimes, which several of these address criminal rights, right? No excessive bail or cruel punishment, no double jeopardy. You can't be charged multiple times for doing the same crime. And people would say, well, I can't really support this Constitution unless you have religious liberty in it or right to free speech. And so the people who wrote the Constitution said, well, you know what? Ratify the Constitution as we wrote it, and we promise that we will very quickly put out amendments to address all the concerns. And so that's what they did. The states ratified the constitutions, and it took a couple of years, but the states ratified the Constitution, and then very quickly, one of the first things that the new government did was pump out these first 10 amendments that we now call the Bill of Rights. Okay, and we've talked about them before. First Amendment is freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition the government. Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. Fifth Amendment, when you plead the fifth, right? It's the Fifth Amendment. You don't have to be a witness against yourself in a criminal proceeding. So these are the first 10 amendments. They were like one of the first things that the new government did. And so we call them the Bill of Rights. It's a lot of rights of people protected against the government. And then over time, you see the years here. Over time, they come out. People, they've sensed a need for these amendments every once in a while. Right after the Civil War, we have what's called the Civil War Amendments or the Reconstruction Amendments. Ends slavery, 13th Amendment. 14th Amendment makes everyone a citizen, regardless of race, specifically those who were formerly enslaved. 15th Amendment gives men, unfortunately, just men, the right to vote. Any citizen the right to vote, regardless of race, color, or creed. So those are the first. Those are the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments, right after the Civil War. Okay, big deal. 16th Amendment invents the income tax. There was not an income tax before that. So that comes from only 1913 did that come about. Then we see 18th Amendment prohibition, 21st Amendment repeals prohibition, 19th Amendment women get the right to vote. 23rd Amendment in 1961 gives residents in Washington, D.C. the ability to vote for president because previously they couldn't. D.C. is not a state, it's not in a state. Washington, D.C. exists outside of the 50 states. And so it kind of had been forgotten. So the 23rd Amendment gives them the right to vote for president. There's only several thousand, I think it's under 1 million people. It's only 700,000 or something people who live in Washington, D.C. It's not very big, right? But the 23rd Amendment addressed an issue. 26th Amendment set the nationwide voting age at 18. Okay, so it's been since 1992. It's been 30 years since we've had a constitutional amendment. It'll be interesting to know what the next constitutional amendment will be. I'm sure there'll be a 28th someday. I have no idea what it might be. But every once in a while, America feels a need to ameliorate, or we can use a good word, to ameliorate a problem, and do so by changing the Constitution. So I'll send this out later. You can check it out. You can read these. These are just my little summaries of these things.
Okay.
So any questions or comments about the amendments of the Constitution?
No,
Any questions?
a new, new things also today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Well,
I just have one question. I came to your class, right? And then I didn't get any credit. I don't know why, on my hours.
yeah, I made sure Christine knows. Maybe she doesn't update it every week or something, but
Yeah.
I put it in there. So
Oh, okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
yeah, sure. I'm sure. Yeah, sometimes the teachers aren't right on top of updating hours, but she will. It's there. It's in the system.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions about anything? Comments? Okay.
The weather getting better, huh?
Yeah, it is. I'm glad it is. Yesterday was really warm.
Yeah, it
In the
was.
50s, almost 60.
Yeah.
It was really nice.
And today it's
Mhm.
not too bad either.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
nice.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. It was like 60 degrees, and I'm telling you, I stepped outside. Oh my God.
I know
Right.
that was nice. Huh?
Great. Yep.
Now I think
Today's like today looks like it's gonna be even more nicer. Oh my Lord. Yes, it is. My bad.
yeah, it's sunny. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, get
That's what
out and
I'm
enjoy
talking
the
about.
weather.
Spring is almost spring. Yeah, spring is almost here. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Let's hope. So, okay. Well, hey, I'll send this out. I'll send it out. I would encourage you to read it over this weekend. And it's interesting to look back on that period. Very short period of history. Yeah, it's funny that the last sentence describes it as a social experiment, and it really is. When you do an experiment, right? You do something to see what will happen, a
Yes.
chemistry experiment or something.
Mhm.
And they changed the law, the Constitution, made the sale of alcohol illegal. They thought they were just like any experiment. You think they thought one thing was going to happen, you know, there'd be no more alcohol. Everybody would be great. But actually a different thing happened. And so they repealed the 18th Amendment. Um, and that's, I think that's really interesting. Very rarely does the government undo something that it's previously done, especially at such a high level. A constitutional amendment is a very big deal.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's kind of cool to think back
Yeah.
on that. So, well, guys, thanks for logging in. Thanks for spending an hour here talking about social studies with me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, enjoy some sun and have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Thank you very much.
Have a
Right.
good weekend too. Hope
Yeah.
there won't be any snow this weekend.
Yeah, I
Right.
don't think so. I think it's going to be nice.
We'll see you. We'll see you next week. Okay.
All right. See you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you very much.